Good morning, San Francisco. Welcome to Free Talk SF. I am your host, Steven Zeiler. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2015. You are joining me from beautiful, beautiful Haight-Ashbury in the heart of San Francisco. Today we're talking about freedom, empathy, and independence for all people in San Francisco. Just like every day, freedom, independence, and empathy for San Francisco. And today I have joining me Joe Jarvis, a wonderful man that I met recently.
Thank you so much for having me.
Author of Anarchy in New England. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. You said I was your first guest, I think, right?
Yeah, you're my first special guest. I wanted to have you on as soon as I read your book. It was amazing.
You actually at PorcFest, you read it so quickly and got back to me that I was very impressed with you. I was excited about that. I appreciated it.
Yeah, I bought a couple books at PorcFest, but I only read yours.
Well, it makes me feel good.
I read it in like a day. Couldn't put it down.
Yeah, relatively short read, but hopefully it gets the point across.
Yeah, so Anarchy in New England. So the book is about a future society. It's what, 100 years in the future?
Yeah, 2115.
Right, and this is after there was an economic collapse in the 2020s, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of mentioned on the periphery a couple of times in the book.
Yeah, and then it's set in New England, and after the collapse, a whole new society emerges that's super free and independent and individualist.
Society kind of grows back without this oppressive government. And because of that, it doesn't take as long for technology to kind of catch up to where it was and then surpass where it was in the 2000s.
Yeah, I love all the high tech vision. The tubes that shoot things around are my favorite part.
Yeah, I really want that to be a reality soon. I'm sick of cars, and I'm sick of having to drive my car and fix it and change the oil. We should be so far past this that it's. I feel like I'm a caveman every time I get in my car.
Well, I don't even do a car anymore. I use the train that's just around the corner.
Yeah. Actually, I think they were talking about the tunnel. So it's like a magnet pod tunnel sort of vacuum tube that shoots these pods through it. They're talking about something similar. I thought it was going to go from the Tesla guy, Elon Musk. Wasn't he talking about something like that? Going from San Francisco to...
I saw an interview with him, and he said that was basically a napkin sketch that he had done one day that he posted on the internet. And then a bunch of people took it and they were like, oh, he's going to build this thing.
Oh, so he was more like trying to just say that somebody should build it.
Or that it could be possible.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the world I want to live in.
He thinks the state of California will never have it.
Probably. They would probably come up with some ridiculous regulations for some reason. They would probably pretend it was going to be less safe, even though plenty of people die in car accidents and...
Yeah, so tell everyone about the main story of the book. It was such a fun read.
So the main story is that there's security companies, because there's still, every once in a while, there's something bad happens or there's disputes to solve and stuff like that. So there's security companies that pretty much act as private police. And the head of the biggest security company in New England, he's a third generation CEO. His grandfather started it. His father took it over. Now it's his. But he's not quite the businessman or the energetic guy that his father and grandfather were. So he has to think of some way to keep his business afloat in the midst of rapidly advancing competitors. So these days, what you would do is probably just go to the government, get a subsidy, get a bailout, bada bing, bada boom, you're good to go. You can just kneecap your competitors with government. But if there's no government, what do you do? So that's his conundrum. And he decides that what he's going to do is try to create that government. And he has a couple of friends that are going to work with him. They're all kind of in the same boat. They don't want to have to compete. So if you don't want to compete in that scenario, you're going to try to take over. And the book's about this attempt to take over, and it's about the mechanisms that a free market might actually provide to keep that from happening.
Yeah, that makes me think of San Francisco. I saw this article recently that it used to be all private police forces.
I just saw that you had posted that. I haven't read it yet, though. What was that about?
Yeah, well, San Francisco is actually a pretty old city, and going back 200 years ago, it was there wasn't like a government police or anything, and there were markets and different shops that just hired their own police or hired their own security, and that was that. And actually, I think there's way more private security forces here in San Francisco right now anyway.
That's interesting. And if you think about it, that makes sense. People get worried. So this is an interesting thing to me. These days, a lot of people want businesses and companies to pay for things through taxes, but they really can't. A corporation isn't going to just pay taxes. They're going to push off the cost to their customers. So it's just interesting to me that people want to use this force to get them to do that when they would voluntarily do it anyway. You know, if you want to go shopping, they want that street to be safe. You're not going to go shopping on a street that you're going to get robbed on. So you go to the mall is going to provide security. And then you don't have to force them to spend tax dollars to provide police. They're voluntarily doing it because it benefits them. Same thing with roads. How are you going to shop at a business if there's not a road to it? So that's kind of the point, that there's already these mechanisms in place, and we remove them, and then we try to use force to get the same results. And it's like the same in San Francisco, the same results were already there. We don't need to tax people and businesses to pay for the police if they voluntarily want the police there to provide that sort of security.
Yeah, well, who would harass the people that are just hanging out in front of their house?
Right, exactly. And that brings to light the real problem.
Well, really, there's not that much of a police problem here in San Francisco. It's quite nice, but I like your point about the roads. Like, there is downtown. There's this giant shopping mall mecca thing. It spans blocks and blocks. Super wealthy, all kinds of great things, and it is surrounded by public transportation, quote unquote,
right,
and like trains and roads, but they paid for all of these giant buildings. They paid for all of this cleaning and maintenance and security. Why wouldn't they just pay for the road to get to the mall, or pay for the train to get to the mall?
Right. These are big companies. They know how to organize. They're not, helpless, because I think people are like, oh, well, it's off their property. How are they going to, build this giant road from wherever to get there? And it's not like that. People can team up. Getting back to the book, with the magnet pods, that tunnel system of little tiny trains that get shot through these tunnels. In order to team up, in order to get your pod or your tunnel connected to that, you just have to use the same sort of system that they're already using in order to plug in. And then you make a deal with wherever you plug in, whoever owns that piece of it. And there you go. I think the same thing could happen with roads. And I think that if we were in that scenario, we'd quickly move beyond needing roads in the sense that we think of them right now. I don't know if you agree with you're more of the, I think, technological side of things. That's I'm assuming how a lot of things work. It's kind of plug into play, have compatible software or whatever if you want to do business. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I imagine that all the trains and roads would have some type of API where you could integrate into their system and just build a larger system out of it.
Right.
API is a application programming interface. If for people who don't do tech stuff
like me.
Yeah, it allows you to program other people's software and interact with it. So I think that's probably how it would work too. One thing in the book, it was about roads. There were a lot of private roads, and one thing I thought was really interesting was some of the companies. I think they were insurance companies. They had customers. Like, some of them were not very hip and up to the times, and they had like really bad access to the private roads.
Yeah.
But there were other companies that had like super awesome passes, and you could go on any road.
I think I mentioned the bundling boom of the 2090s, at which point companies found out that people wanted a one-stop shop. We kind of, it kind of came back around, almost like a supermarket. You don't want to have to go to the butcher, you don't want to have to go to the baker and the farm stand. So there were supermarkets. So the same sort of thing happens where people are like, this is too much to keep track of. It's annoying to have to pay this bill, pay that bill, and that's when you talk about government with people, I've heard a lot of people say, well, I want a town government. They pick up my trash, they plow the roads, they do this, that, and the other thing. And it's at what cost? At what cost do you want those things done? That giving them the type of power that they have now is insane, so that they'll come and pick up the leaves on the side of the road. Really, you would just have to go to a company that bundles all these things together. So about the book, Drake, the CEO of of NESA, New England Security Agency, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get that people want this bundling, that people aren't so much thinking about security because things are pretty safe. So if they go to Atlas Protection, they're getting a road pass to every road in New England, except for the one that Drake owns. He doesn't play nice, so that's why his business isn't doing so hot. People just want easy bundling. Like you said, the insurance companies, they sell you the product, but on top of it, they're going to give you all these other things. Oh, and you get access to Route 90, and you get to do this and that. That's the way things.
Well, one thing that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was done.
Well, so a lot of people will say this makes sense. Private security to protect your different areas. Like out here, I'm looking at Haight Street, and Haight Street is a lot of shops. But then there's also like I think 600 what they call baseline or homeless, more of a derogatory term, but people who just live out here and they choose to hang out. And they kind of just hang out in front of the shops. And I've seen the shop owners calling the police all the time. And the police don't really do anything. Like they have no recourse because it's a public space.
Right.
But I would imagine if there were private forces, then they would be able to do what they needed to do.
Well, yeah.
So a lot of people bring up, if there were private police forces, wouldn't they like get in a war with each other?
Right. And so my thing is, the only way that you can get in a war is if you can steal somebody's money to pay for it. Nobody's going to spend their own money on a war because it will not increase your profits. If you're a private company, you have to turn a profit, and bullets are expensive. But it just doesn't look good to the public to be getting in wars with people. People are gonna, if your security company gets in a war with another security company, I'm going to a different one because those costs are going to be passed off on me. They're going to say, oh, well, we had to get in a war with this security company, so we're raising rates. No, thanks. I'm good. Don't get in wars with people. So another product that grows out of this is the product for arbitration. Agencies that are gonna keep you from having to go to war with people. And you're both going to sign up because it's going to benefit you both. The two security companies, they both want to go to an arbiter because they don't want the costs associated with war. And they want the legitimacy for their customers. They want to be able to sell their customers law in the sense where it's not just the guys with the most guns. We're all working together and we're figuring this out based on the region, based on the customers. Essentially, the contracts that these security companies write are law. And whoever what their customers want, the demand of those customers makes up what that law is. It's gonna be pretty basic, I don't want somebody to trespass on my house. If they do, I want to be able to bring them to justice. If somebody wrongs me, I want to be able to recover some injury from that. So these really aren't enormously hard problems to solve. And there's really no evidence that says solving them with the force of government has benefited us.
I love that. It makes peace a product that you can buy and that can be like competed on in the market, and people can provide better, cheaper solutions for peace. And there are tons of people here with tons of money that would probably use it to pay for peace and
Yeah.
tranquility.
Yeah, and I was thinking with the homeless people out on the streets, it might have sounded a little scary if you're like, well, then if it was private roads, you could just kind of get rid of them. But it wouldn't. I don't think it would be like that, because I think a lot of people these days are looking for compassionate solutions. So you might see people, you might just not have homeless people, because it really, in a society with enough extra wealth, when it's not being, first of all, confiscated by government, and second of all, people aren't going to want to make as much when it's confiscated by government. So there would actually be more wealth, not only available, but in all. So some of that wealth is going to be used to help these people voluntarily, because if I go down the street, I don't want to see homeless people. I would rather them have a good life and not have to, maybe it's still selfish. I don't want to be depressed by looking at these people, but still, I would, if I can help them out and then, clean up the area that I like to be in, great. And in the book, there was something I coined the term AdApp, for advertisers apartments. And that is, if you think about a free website right now, you go to the website and you're advertised to, but it's free. If you think about these advertisers apartments or ad apps, it would be the same thing. You get a free apartment, but you're advertised to the entire time. On the walls, there might be advertisements, and then through your little vacuum tubes, you can order whatever's being advertised, and that pays for the apartment.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. The ad app. We have in San Francisco a lot of laws requiring new buildings to build affordable housing units in the lower part of the building, and these are basically like paid for by the city. I think the city pays something like $1,400 a month per person or something.
Wow!
And they get a house, but in the ad app world, that all that cost would be paid for by advertising. And even if in the book, if people don't. If, say someone's living in an ad app and they have their free house, and they see all these ads, even if they don't buy anything, the ad app owners still let them stay, because there would be such public backlash against the ad app company if they kicked out the people at the lowest end of society.
Exactly, because I think that you would see that go into their advertising. The ad apps are gonna say, look at the service we're providing for people. We're giving people who wouldn't otherwise have homes. So they can't just turn around after doing something like that and kick somebody out. And if they do, it's a larger threat to their profits than the few people that are kind of gaming the system. Because if you think about it, most people, advertising works. That's why we do it. That's why those websites are free, because advertising does work and people do click and people do buy. So it would be the same thing. Not everybody, but with, facial recognition, and it's coming. And I try to add, realistic things in the book. You're going to be advertised to based on facial recognition. But if you think about it, you could think of that as a good thing, because then these ad companies don't have to waste as much money. So their ads are so targeted that it doesn't cost them as much to advertise. And there is, again, more excess wealth, lowers costs, and brings up quality.
Yeah, and I like it on the surface. I think a lot of people would have emotional problems just trying to get over the homeless aspect of it. Like in the book, everyone has to buy their own independent protection service or protection subscription from a security agency. And what would you say for people who can't afford protection? How would that work? How would they be protected?
Well, and mostly what would probably happen is that it would be such a safe place that you could kind of get away with that. But there's also certain thing in the book. There was a Utopia Corp, which was essentially a company where anybody could get a job there as long as you weren't a complete a drug addict, and as long as you showed up for your shifts, and they provided everything for you. So if you're the type of person that really can't, you don't want to deal with something, you don't want to, or maybe you can't for whatever emotional reason handle living on your own, then you can't. There are places that make their money off of providing you a job, low level job, but then giving you an apartment and giving you everything that you need in exchange for your labor. So there's going to be things like that, and that's going to be worth it for the company because they get this large swath of labor, and part of what they're trading for it is something that, you know, if they have an entire apartment building, it doesn't cost. They can give $1,000 worth of an apartment to somebody, but it only costs them $500. So that's part of the reasons why this would work for the company. But the other thing is that I think there would be charities for this sort of thing as well. I think that there would be advocacy groups that, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to see other people victimized. So they would voluntarily donate to these sorts of things. And not only individuals, again, the companies would voluntarily do these things in order to attract customers. In a competitive marketplace, an insurance company, one of these bundlers that's going to give you all these different products, might say, and 5% of our profits are put into this fund that gives people that can't afford security. And you already see that with private schools these days will offer tuition to some people who can't afford it. And there's, you know, scholarships and things like that. So there's no reason to think that wouldn't carry over to other sectors. I think that in general, people are pretty compassionate when it's easy for them to be. Unfortunately, the easiest way for people to be compassionate these days, they think, is to just pay taxes or to advocate higher taxes. But that money's wasted. The companies you actually would have control over, if they're gonna do this to attract the customers, they're gonna do it efficiently because they're a company and they depend on it for profits. Again, you don't have the right incentives when you're taking somebody's money and using somebody else's money to do these things because it's unlimited. This gets back to the same thing with the wars. You know, nobody's getting in a war with their own money. People are only getting in wars with money that they take. And I think you could carry that over to this scenario as well.
Yeah, and I think you could actually have a product like poverty insurance rather than donating money directly to someone. You could buy insurance on their behalf, and then the insurance company would have an incentive to make sure that that person stays clean and healthy and has a safe place to be.
That's a good point as well. And in the book I have, you know, I mentioned at one point, because there's a drug addict, Tricks, and drugs are legal, so it's, you know, you could still have drug addicts, but he's not homeless. He has an ad app. But anyway, at one point, somebody sees him on the street, and a guy, the arbiter Barry, gives him money because he sees a client, and he thinks the client will think of him better if he gives this drug addict money. But the client says, "Hey, you shouldn't give those drug addicts money. Guess what? There's a program that I'm working on where you can donate money on his behalf for rehab if he wants to go. And if he shows up in 30 days, that money goes to his treatment. And if he doesn't show up, it goes to somebody else's treatment." So that would
Perfect.
Just be, yeah.
Well, so it turns out there actually was a war between private security companies in San Francisco once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think in the mid 1800s there was a drought and a famine, and people were having a really hard time getting protein, and they actually had to get protein from this island out in the middle of the ocean, like 20 miles away.
Yeah.
There were all these birds covering the island, and they made really big eggs, and there were two factions that had a war over this one island.
Yeah. So I suppose that's the scarcity of resources thing, right? If resources are scarce enough, then you could still have a profitable war. Would you say that was more of a product of, first of all, other conditions that, you know, that could have been contributed to by government, and second of all, something that wouldn't happen in a society where I can talk to you from San Francisco face to face online?
Right. I think that like even more than like freedom from coercion, like freedom from lack of wealth is the biggest freedom that we have these days. And like a high tech society can provide all kinds of things that they couldn't back then. I mean, it was a new colony. There were like tons of people moving in, but not enough food. Though, like I guess I can see that happening again if the supply chains are interrupted.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really a big advocate of independent local farms, like urban
Yes.
farms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was inspired by the book. One of the big company that emerges from the dark ages in the book is Urban Food Corp. No, it's Food Corp.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And yeah, Food Corp is this company that builds a walled city and has what I assume like towers with food that they're producing.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
they're the only ones that can really survive.
And that's why you then see, and I'm writing that one right now. That's a prequel, Food Corp. But that's why the New England Society was able to regrow without government, because they had this example of the only little society that survived the apocalypse, essentially. And then it grew out of there. It was the seed. So that's why it's able to do that. And I think that's a great idea. I think right now the costs are, whether it's artificially because of subsidies from the government or not, the costs of food are still too low to do that. I think that if you had skyscraper farms in New York City right now, the food from that would still just cost more than the food that they're shipping in. But I agree with you. I think you need a very diversified portfolio of sorts in food, because when you centralize these things, all you need is one mess up and it's all gone. If you have 1 million cows together and one gets a disease and it spreads rapidly, that's going to be a lot worse than if you have 1 million farms with one cow and is just not going to be able to destroy the same amount of food in one fell swoop.
Yeah, I totally agree that the economics of local food production, because of the global market, there's not that much incentive from like just a price standpoint. But right. I care a lot less about the price. Actually, I decided a long time ago that I would spend as much as money of my money as was necessary to get good food. Like that's the one thing that I would make sure to pay for. And I think a lot of people are willing to pay for more sustainable, more independent, local, organic, healthier food.
I agree. And I think that there are certain indicators of that as well. McDonald's profit slipping and stuff like that, where I think we are on the verge of this, probably this food revolution, or, kind of revolt from where we've been with the whole corporate factory farming thing. And hopefully what falls away with that is the food subsidies that are currently making the shelf price of this GMO mass-produced food lower, while the actual costs are higher because of those subsidies are hidden.
Yeah, I would love to see just the people not even wanting that subsidized food because it's not good. It's low quality. Some of it's really not even food at all. And we're so wealthy right now that we could change our mindset about what it is, what kind of food we want, how we want to support our local farms. I was inspired by the book to grow food. So starting this weekend, I'm going to have sprouts and spinach growing in my house in a hydroponic farm.
That's awesome to hear. I love stuff like that. That's one of the reasons I'm moving south is to spend more time gardening, growing my own food, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hope to start a whole thing about it. I'm sure there are hundreds of people around town who would love to grow food, and I'll pool it.
Yeah.
And show people. I think it's really important to show people how to run an independent society that doesn't need state subsidies. It doesn't need global supply chains for basic necessities.
It's the same old teach a man to fish thing, a little cliche, but it's true. If people know how to do these things themselves, that even if it's only a safety net, that's a great safety net to have, being able to be self-sufficient if you have to. You know, there's certain benefits to the global market, and while it exists, we should definitely use them, but we need a backup plan, because if it all falls apart, then we need to be self-sufficient. I like to do things like forage. And so that, I think we were talking about this at Pork Fest, where imagine if there was just, if we set up every street, every sidewalk, every path, every yard to have this abundance of forageable food based on just setting it up in the first place, just having the right plants, the right ecosystems where you walk down the street and you can just grab food. That would alleviate a lot of ills in the society, right down to the fact that fresh food is medicine. That's what I want to get back to as well, that a lot of these, you know, we don't need health and food. It's a lot of what's causing these health problems are bad food. So if you cut out the middleman, just food is medicine, you know?
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for the inspiration. I love the book, Anarchy in New England. You can get it on Amazon. Is that the best way to get it to support you, or is there a better way?
Amazon, or you can buy it off fpp.cc if you have Bitcoin. So it is available through Bitcoin. If you're in my area, you know, look for an event, but I think, you know, I'm talking to you from San Francisco, so I think the best way is probably Amazon or using Bitcoin on fpp.cc. And if you want, you can go to my website, joejarvis.me, and click through there, or read a little bit more about of the nonfiction stuff that I do. But I really appreciate you having. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was really fun.
fpp.cc for sure. I've got to spend my non-state Bitcoin. I don't want to use those Federal Reserve notes anymore.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.